What's up, heroes? Welcome to the Producer Life Podcast, episode 77. Today, Zach Domer joins us, who's better known by his nickname Pony. Pony is a CD Baby veteran, hailing from the early days when they only offered distribution of physical CDs, and more recently has served as the brand manager and public face for Soundrop, a CD Baby sister company that focuses on distribution of cover songs. Soundrop currently pays out over $1.5 million in artist earnings every month, making it one of the top digital music distributors in the world. In this episode, we talk about the similarities and differences between CD Baby and Soundrop, branding choices, and the basics of cover licensing. At the end of the episode, I've also got a big announcement about the podcast, so make sure you listen all the way through. But first, cue the intro music. All right, Pony, welcome to the Producer Life Podcast.
Thanks, Brian. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. Soundrop seems like an amazing company, and you guys have a lot of cool services that I think my audience is going to be really interested in. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Nice, me too.
Let's kind of start at the beginning. What brought you into the music industry?
Well, I've been a musician myself since I was a kid. I've always played bass. So bass, my main instrument, the only instrument I ever really specialized on. And, I was into rock and roll and metal and Rush and Primus and stuff like that growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And by the early 2000s, I had moved out to Portland, to the Northwest on the wave of grunge, with all my friends and my friends' bands and my bands and everything. So we were living out in the Northwest and just, doing whatever day jobs. And then one day I was kind of looking for a new day job to kind of support my music habit. And a friend said, "Hey, there's a music company that's out by the airport. They sell CDs. You should go apply there." And so I drove out there, walked in, and there was a guy sitting there, John Stoip, and he was the office manager, general manager, vice president guy who kind of ran the show at the time. And I said, "Hey, somebody directed me here. I need a job. Do you need any workers?" And he, a little roundabout, he made me kind of like prove that I was a musician and a couple questions, and come to get hired, packing up CD orders for 24 hours a week at $8 an hour. So yeah, I started at CD Baby in like 2004 or something, 2004, I think. And yeah, just shipping out CDs. So however long later, 17, 18 years later, here I am on the director of strategic initiatives for the company. And I report directly to the president. And the president, it's funny, he was a guy who got hired just a few months before me, and his job was to shelve the CDs when they came in from the artists.
Oh, man.
So back then, CD Baby, the only thing we did was, if you're a band, we'll sell your CD for you on the internet. And we put up a web page. And people and your fans can just order it off the internet, and you don't have to ship it to them and deal with the payment and all that stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was before Amazon and iTunes and any kind of like e-commerce that people could do on their own. Bandcamp wasn't anything, none of that stuff existed yet. So, it was really innovative. But yeah, it's funny that sometimes I'm talking to Joel, who's our president, and it's just like, oh man, what a ride this has been.
Yeah. Tell me about how you were CD Baby for quite some time before you moved to Soundrop, correct?
Yes. Well, Soundrop actually is a sister company of CD Baby. So we, we work from the same kind of like pool of resources. We're owned by the same company. And we work side by side, just kind of for different artist communities. So Soundrop actually was came from an acquisition that CD Baby made in 2014, 2015, somewhere in that area. There was a digital distribution company called Louder. And I don't know if you remember them. Those guys went on to
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So their thing was, hey, we allow your fans to download your cover song from a web page that you can direct them to, and we do the licensing for you. So that was their big innovation. They started that integrated licensing thing. So at first their business was just direct download sales, and they handled the licensing. And then they started getting into distribution. Well, they started growing, and after a while they were like, yeah, we really just need to focus on the licensing part, and they wanted to get out of distribution. So CD Baby acquired that distribution catalog and the accounts and everything, and said, oh man, Louder's going to get out of distribution. So instead of letting all those artists just have to find a new solution, have all their stuff come down and start up again, CD Baby just transitioned it into a new brand called Soundrop, which had the same features that those artists, the Louder users, loved, which was revenue splits between collaborators and the integrated cover song licensing, and a really low upfront cost. Like, you don't have to pay anything to get started. You just pay a commission to Louder on whatever the song earns. So when CD Baby acquired them, Louder was going to continue as a licensing company and all this stuff. So they had to rebrand this distribution service. There was conversation, do we fold it all into CD Baby? But that didn't seem right to the artists that had been using Louder, because the features were different, the pricing was different. So that we decided to start up a whole new distribution service called Soundrop that was going to carry over all the content and the catalog from the Louder days and those features for the types of artists that needed those features. So they brought me in. I had actually stepped away from CD Baby and was doing some other kind of things that didn't really work out. And so I kind of came back to CD Baby and said, hey, now I'm in between things again. Do you have like a temporary project? Because by this point, I was a project manager at the company. I said, hey, do you have a temporary project I could do for a while I, look for a new, permanent position somewhere? And they were like, oh yeah, sure. We just did this acquisition and we're rebranding it, and we need to do this brand launch and the artist change management and get everybody over to the new thing, and just move over all the data and the content and that whole migration. It was a big project. And so I did that, and I got Soundrop launched and was ready to like move on with my life. And they were like, hey, why don't you stay on and continue to run this thing? And I was like, oh, that sounds like a sweet gig. And, during the time of the transition from Louder to Soundrop, I got to know a lot of these musicians and saw the stuff that they were doing. And I came from the world of 90s rock and metal bands, and to see what people were doing now with the VGM covers and the YouTube strategy that people have of these constant cover song releases and really engaging with their fans, I really did just fall in love with these artist communities. And I've just been doing that ever since, up until this year, where I'm transitioning to the director of strategic initiatives back to CD Baby, and we're kind of reorganizing how Soundrop works, but we're just kind of in the beginning of that. So that's my big project now. It's exciting.
That does sound exciting. Take me back to the early days of Soundrop. I think your LinkedIn page described you as a brand manager. So what did that mean that you were doing for the company at the time?
I mean, I had to just completely figure out how this brand was going to present itself to the world. So I had to go in and, set up the social media profiles and start coming up with an engagement strategy. And my title was brand manager, but I was kind of just like a general operations manager as well. I kind of come into this role as like the founder of Soundrop. So my title being brand manager, because I had to get this brand out to the world and figure out something that was going to represent it well and resonate with the type of artists that we wanted to serve.
Okay. What, obviously this podcast is geared towards DJs and producers. And so branding is one of the things we have talked about in the past. What sort of considerations and what things ran through your head as you were trying to come up with a brand for the company and how you were going to present it?
Well, the first thing is, why is this different than CD Baby? Like, we already have a distribution company that essentially does the same thing. Mm-hmm. So the biggest, the needle I have to thread is, if we weren't all part of the same, family of brands, then I could just come out and start, figuring out how to criticize all the other distributors and why we're better than all of them. But it's hard. You can't really, number one, it's better to say things about yourself. But number two, one of those competitors is actually our sister company. And so right away it was like, okay, we got to figure out what makes us unique and what makes us great and which artists would use Soundrop, but not CD Baby, and vice versa. So we determined right away that Soundrop was going to be for more of a niche type of artist. And we said it's going to be the artists that do cover songs, they do singles, they are probably more focused on their video releases, and the distribution part is maybe secondary. And then they also are much more in tuned to like an online engagement. So if you've been a band that's been plugging away, touring, you're really attuned to the live environment, the studio, things like that. The types of artists that we decided to focus on and serve were the ones that were making music in their homes. And they were they were performing on YouTube, and they were engaging deeply with their fans. They might not have had a ton of fans, but the ones that were getting replies on their comments. And they were like, taking their suggestions and potentially like covering songs that were requested. So I said, I thought to myself, like, these artists need, they merit a deeper level of engagement, a more personal online relationship with a brand, just as they are engaging as a brand with their fans. We need to engage as a brand humanely with our clients. And just using social media, and even when it came to kind of taking an approach to our support and operations, it was always like, these are the artists that we're focusing on. Is it every artist in the world? No. Is it even most artists in the world? No, because CD Baby's been doing this since the late 90s, and they've already got that cornered. They're going to be the best at that. So we just looked at which artists are CD Baby, or which artists aren't using CD Baby and why. And it's usually the price, the features weren't quite right, and they just were more comfortable with something that was smaller and more focused, and maybe more able to interact. I don't know if that makes any sense. So
it does. It does.
Yeah, and I think that Soundrop, the way that Soundrop handles its branding and its comms, or its public communications, is more like what an artist would do. You just want to understand, like, what personality do I want to convey to the world? There's a million different ways to do it, with words, without words, with a person, like a human persona, or without. But you got to think about what your audience is perceiving, and then play that, play up to that. And don't worry about, oh, am I going to, alienate some people? Yeah, you have to. because that's what things require today. You go on YouTube and find a ton of creators that have millions of subscribers, and you've never heard of them. And their fans haven't heard of each other's favorite artists either, because they just build communities and they're just there for their fans and not always focusing on, oh, but how do I make myself more accessible and how do I get a bigger fan base? It's just focus on like the thing you do and being and representing it really authentically. And whoever likes the people that like that, give them everything. I mean, okay. Patreon, there's tools today that make that so much more possible than ever before, like Patreon and Bandcamp.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys honed in on this niche market. So was there much angst at CD Baby about kind of cannibalizing their customers, or was that part of the discussion as you guys were trying to figure out how to best use this louder acquisition?
Well, it was definitely part of the discussion because basically CD Baby does a lot, and you pay for it. You know, but the type of artists CD Baby's dealing with typically are putting out an album every 2 years or every year or 2 years. And if you're doing that, then paying like $100 for a premium service is not out of the question. It's not out of your budget. It's like, it's easy for all that you get for that. But on the other hand, you're putting out a single every single week. You can't, a lot of people can't afford all the services that you can't afford to pay for CD Baby and don't need all that service. So I always think a CD Baby is like the 5-star steakhouse. You sit down, you know you're paying for it, but you're getting appetizer, drinks, like potatoes and with sour cream and stuff. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing, dessert and everything. And you pay for it. And Soundrop's more like that, like awesome taqueria that you go to for lunch, where you roll up and they're like, oh, hey, I know you. And, you know, like try the new sauce. And it's like, you know, you're eating out of your hands in a parking lot, but it's delicious. And you love those. And it's like, sometimes there's a 5-star. Some people go to the steakhouse and some people go to the taqueria, and maybe you even go to different ones on different days, depending on what you're in the mood for. And that's kind of just the way that we played it with Soundrop versus CD Baby. Which is like, there is a market for this other service. And that's been proven. I mean, Soundrop's just grown, I was going to say exponentially. That's a hyperbole, but since the louder days, the amount that we're paying to artists has like quadrupled.
I think I saw a figure, and I don't know the date of this on LinkedIn, but you guys had $1.5 million payouts to artists some years ago.
Well, we grew to the point where we were paying out about $1.5 million a month to independent artists. Yep. Wow, and in fact, this past month, we just paid out for June last week for Soundrop, and it was our biggest payout ever. And I think it was like $1.66 million.
Wow. Congratulations. That's really your baby here.
Oh yeah, it totally is. It really does feel like it, because, at first it was just kind of like, Pony, just make this thing happen, make the decisions, get it off the ground, make it happen. And it's so gratifying, because, I feel like the artists that we work for have also become bigger, and just the stuff that they do is more mainstream now than when we started it. So, for instance, when I started Soundrop, my friends would be like, oh, like, here's this album, like, you could go stream it on Spotify. Like, I discovered this new band, or I discovered this new artist, and I'm sending you a Spotify link or an iTunes link or something like that. Mm-hmm. And now when people are like, oh, I want to show you this musician or this cool song, they show me a person doing a cover song on YouTube. And And that's incredible because I'm like, yeah, we saw that. And I like to think we played a role in that for a lot of artists. Because YouTube kind of is what it is. It's hard to make money on YouTube. But you can, with a certain amount of content at a certain quality and a strategic way of deciding what songs to cover, you can actually make some real money on Spotify. You can't just log into Spotify and upload your songs and have people start streaming them. You have to go through a distributor because it's a commercial product. But there's money there. And we hear it from artists all the time. Like, I had no idea. Like, I've just been posting my stuff on YouTube and just praying that someday I could monetize my channel. As soon as I, put my entire catalog on Spotify through Soundrop, a few months later, I start getting a check every month.
That's awesome. Do you have any particular, I mean, obviously you can't talk about personal finances, but do you have a couple of artists that really jump to mind for sort of success stories?
Well, he's not a video game guy, but his name is Daniel Jang, and he's a violinist, and he does incredible. Like, if you look him up on YouTube, I think I can't remember what he's called now. I just have his name in my head, but yeah, Daniel Jang is his name.
Okay,
I can
include a link in the show notes.
Yeah. And, obviously can't share financial information, but
okay,
he's just
but you've seen him kind of grow up with Soundrop.
What's that?
But you've kind of seen him grow up with Soundrop and listenership expanding. And I get absolutely.
And I mean, from the point where it's like, oh, fun YouTuber is like really talented to like, this guy's legit. This is a career. I've seen multiple musicians at this point in these last 5 years. I've seen multiple musicians go from like putting out a lot of covers to getting real money. Yeah. To the point where people I'll run into, not so much in the last year or so, but I'd run into people at conventions that would just be like, thank you so much. I quit my job.
Yeah. That's got to be incredibly gratifying.
Oh my God. It's the best, especially as a musician myself, being able to just go, man, every day I have the opportunity to make the world a better place for musicians. And even if they don't use Soundrop, because if Soundrop is good, it means that that's pressure on all the other distributors to be better. And if distributors are great, then Bandcamp and Patreon have to be even better. And, just like that, because that's always been the thing about CD Baby was technology is cool. Yeah, the music industry, we have to know how it works to give artists access to it. But the thing that CD Baby trailblazed, if that's the right way to use that word, was the customer service side of it. Like, this isn't just an app, and this isn't just like a music company, like a label where you hope they sign you so they can invest in you. Like, we really approached it as like that. I remember people talking about Zappos in the early days of CD, and just like that focus on the customer, the client, the musician, the artist, the creator, like really, really, really do it for them. And it's great to be a part of a company as a musician where I get to participate in that. And it'd be great to play bass for a living, but this I can have way more effect.
Yeah. Are you still part of a band?
Oh yeah, I still play. I'm not, quote unquote, in a band anymore because of all the stuff that goes along with that. I mean, I got a professional job, I got a kid, I got a side business and stuff. And so these like three drunken practices a week, and then, 2 or 3 unattended crappy shows, that you just feel like you have to do just because you got to get out. Like that stuff, I never really got any traction with any of the bands I was in. Now I'm just like a session fill-in guy. So I step into a band, they've already got their songs, and they just need somebody to perform in the bass lines. And that's all I want to do. I don't want to write a bunch of music. I just want to show up and execute your bass guitar lines perfectly on your record. So I get to work with better musicians now than I did when I was in bands.
That's awesome. Well, good. I'm glad you're still continuing to play as well. I'm sure that gives you a connection with a lot of your artists too when you're talking with them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're all what gives us the most connection when we talk to artists for Soundrop is just embracing our nerdy, human, vulnerable side. So, and we've got people who at Soundrop who aren't musicians themselves, but they're music lovers, or they love YouTube cover song artists, or they're geeky about comic books or video games or pro wrestling or music theory or, pop culture or you name it. And you don't have to be a musician. You just have to love music and love musicians and like just completely embrace your nerdy side.
Yeah. With us kind of coming out of the pandemic here in the United States, I would think with your kind of core target niche audience of YouTube cover song artists, you saw a big, the pandemic kind of helped boost numbers, I would think, over the last year. I would think a lot of people were putting out a lot more cover songs. Is that true, or what did the pandemic do to your business model last year?
It didn't really do anything I wouldn't say it did anything to the business model. We got a spike in the spring when everybody realized, oh crap, I can't. A CD Baby was actually more affected by it because I think they have a lot of artists that haven't necessarily released everything, that they have a lot of demos and unreleased stuff. Soundrop artists, I feel like they release almost everything. They just make something and release it. So CD Baby artists were like uploading their entire back catalog of demos because they can't go into the studio, they can't tour, they can't play live, On the Soundrop side, we still got a spike because I think there was just something in the air where people are like, I got to put music on the internet. I got to get stuff on Spotify. This is going to be my outlet. I think we have a lot of artists that probably do other music jobs that got shut down, or they do, whatever service industry jobs, education jobs, and things are getting shut down. So we got a little bit of a spike. Nothing that was, made us rethink everything. It was just like, man, no, we're here. We just have to be reliable. We just have to, we're just the, a really important service and tool for these artists right now. So just keep up with it. It's just about keeping up with it. And then so I wouldn't say that the pandemic made us pivot in any way. It just deepened our resolve.
Okay. Awesome. With your, again, looking at your core audience of cover artists, we haven't really defined what a cover is. I know I've talked about this in some of my previous episodes, but can you kind of briefly explain what a cover is and where that falls into, maybe briefly explain cover versus derivative work versus, what can you legally submit to Soundrop for release?
That is a really good question, and there's a ton of confusion about this, notably in the VGM producer world where the term remix gets used a lot. Sometimes it's an actual remix, and sometimes it's like, we call it a remix because it sounds like a remix. But a cover song is you take a song that somebody else wrote and you perform it. It's your performance of somebody else's composition. And you are not, you're not changing it in any meaningful way. So you're not changing the lyrics, you're not changing the language of the lyrics, you're not changing the underlying chord structure, and you're not changing the melody, and you're not meaningfully changing the arrangement. it should be recognizable as the original song without any added or subtracted elements or altered elements, if that makes sense. So a derivative work is when you are altering some of those, one of the or more of those elements. So if you translate the lyrics, that's a derivative work. If you change the melody, that's a derivative work. Or if you mash up the melody of one song with the underlying chord structure of another song, which is a really popular thing to do on YouTube, but that's not a cover song and you can't legally distribute that. Because there's a law that if a song has been released officially in the United States, anybody can do their own version of that. And they can even release it and sell it as long as they're properly crediting the original writer and paying royalties as due, or that somebody is paying the royalties. So yeah, I mean, the way that we define a cover, and we say, yeah, we can license straight covers. And so there's some gray area. And of course, like, unfortunately, none of this stuff is ever as simple and as black and white as we want it to be. Even when you're talking about the law, right? There's a reason there's judges, because the law needs to be interpreted. But we don't, with this stuff, we're working on it at a level like that's much more nuanced than the law can really fully and thoroughly account for. So there's some interpretation, there's some gray area, but we do our best to make sure that like we're distributing everything that we can for artists without knowingly distributing something for them that could be problematic for either them or publisher or the DSP or whatever.
So are you guys listening to every release, or are you relying on the artist to say, yeah, this meets the criteria for a cover song?
We actually have a team of human beings that listen to every release. They check it, they listen to it, they go, oh shoot, like you can't do this, and then we will just like push back. They're like, you got to take this song off, or you can't distribute this.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, people will use, especially in the video game music, people want the samples. They want to sample the video game,
Mm-hmm.
So they, they record the little coin clink, or, you get the ring or shoot the laser or whatever, and they try to use that. And we have to check for that stuff. We're like, you have to recreate these sounds. If you want to, you can do like a Sonic the Hedgehog cover, and you can have the rings, collecting sound, but you got to recreate it yourself. You don't have permission to use the original sound recording.
So for a producer, you talked about it being your original performance, and it has to be recognizable as the original, and you can't change the lyrics or translate the lyrics. For a producer, in terms of what a performance is, that would mean they would have to create all the sounds from originals or licensed samples through some sort of sample service, but they can't include any of the original sound recordings.
Correct. You can't literally just remix the original sound recording and distribute that as if it's yours. And call it a cover. You can't do that.
Okay.
Your original, you have to recreate the rule of thumb is you can't use anybody else's audio. You can cover their composition and you can perform their composition, but you can't sample their audio recording. Another thing you can't do, which is like hangs up a lot of people, is you can't distribute a cover song of something that has never been officially released as an audio only recording in the United States. And that messes up a lot of video game people, because video game soundtracks and the music from video games is not reliably released in an audio only soundtrack format in the United States, like predictably and thoroughly, and as a standard thing. Especially retro games, like older games, that stuff's hard to find. So there's like a little bit of, you got to do a little research. I mean, you can put something up on YouTube and hope for the best, but if you want to distribute it as a commercial product through Soundrop, it can't be the first version of it that's been released. And it can't be released before the copyright owner has released their official version. So another stuff gets up on Spotify, not through us, but through other distributors that shouldn't be up there. And artists will go, hey, there is already a release of this, and it's not an official one. And so we go, yeah, no, that's not legit. That person shouldn't. If you can't find that song from that game on an original soundtrack. Now, it might have, even if it was only released on a CD in the United States in the early 2000s, that's okay. That's an official US release. And so you can cover that music.
Is there a database or something? I mean, how would an artist go out there to find out whether or not it's been officially released? Or is that just a check Spotify, check iTunes, see if you can find the soundtrack for your favorite video game?
It's kind of that. There is a service called VGMDB.org, I want to say. We use that. But we also have Easy Song licensing as a partner. So sometimes an artist can't find something, but Easy Song can. And it's like, all right, this one's good to go.
Okay. So I had, as you know, Aaron Green on a couple of episodes back, and he talked about Easy Song licensing as sort of an independent service that artists can go to and get clearance for cover songs. But you guys have a much tighter partnership with them. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah. So any artist can actually go to Easy Song and get their licensing. And they do all kinds of stuff that you can't do through Soundrop. But for straight up cover song licensing, our system's actually connected on the back end to Easy Song's system. So when an artist sets up their release in Soundrop, we ask them some questions about what was give us a link to the original release, who was the original artist, try to get some information about it. And then we ping that over to Easy Song and they license it. And then they kind of shoot a clearance back to us. And then as activity happens on that song after it's distributed, and then revenue comes into Soundrop, if the artist owes any royalties on that activity, we just pull that out of the earnings, send it to Easy Song, and they take care of all the payments and they work with the publishers and everything. So for a very specific use, our system is integrated with Easy Songs. So instead of having to go to Easy Song and then go to Soundrop, you just go to Soundrop and we take care of the Easy Song part. But it's got to be a straight up cover song.
Got it. And so as I recall with Easy Song licensing, that they handle the mechanical licensing that basically allows you there to be as many streams as occur. And they handle all of the payments for those streams. But then after, if people want to do digital downloads, they want to purchase a copy of the song through iTunes or whatnot. With Easy Song licensing, you had to go back and manually purchase more after you've used up that allotment. Is that handled more seamlessly through Soundrop?
Yeah, because it's pay as you go. So what you had to do if you're distributing a release through CD Baby in 2010, you go to Easy Song, you buy 1,000 DPD licenses or whatever, and then every time, and you basically have like a big tally sheet. Every time you get a download, you have to check one off. And then, I got 1,000 downloads, time to go buy 1,000 more. And so you're kind of buying in bulk. Most artists aren't using everything that they're buying. And it's just a little inefficient, especially if you're releasing a cover song single every week, So the way that Soundrop and Easy Song work is we get it licensed and we send the NOI and notify the publisher and everything, but they don't get a royalty unless you get a download. And you get a download and then we ping it off the top. There's the 9 cents back through Easy Song and the publisher gets it. So you don't have to do this bulk business. And
Okay.
because it's handled through an official licensor like EasySong, the download can occur. And then once it's reported to the distributor, which is us, then we report it to EasySong, and then the royalty gets paid. So you don't have to do that big batch at the beginning. You just do it for what you sell, pay for what you sell.
Wow, that seems a whole lot more streamlined. That's much more user friendly than sort of the, hey, we've got a partnership with Easy Song Licensing. Go over there and then come back to us.
Soundrop's integration and the way it's set up is for a real specific use case of somebody who's doing like, frequent cover song releases.
Got it.
But for those people, the old system was prohibitive. And basically, if you're putting out a cover song every 2 weeks, you're going to license all of that. You're going to keep all those spreadsheets and
keep track of your downloads. That's kind of crazy. Yeah. So in terms of partnerships, I noticed on your website, I went through and I signed up and kind of poked around a little bit. You guys also have a partnership with TrackLib, and for sample clearance. Is there some sort of a similar transparent method there as well, or are you simply recommending their service for clearing samples for use in covers? Or
yeah, we just we do have a system with TrackLib, but I think it's TrackLib, but those guys work really hard to get a bunch of pre-cleared samples. So for producers that utilize samples, you can go to TrackLib and they have a huge library, and there's a way that you can actually you can use those samples and those audio recordings in your own music and distribute it, and it all happens on the back end with TrackLib. But it's not integrated to the degree that EasySong is. It's not like, okay, it's just not used quite as much, but we have a referral partnership with them. So you click that link and you get a little bit of a deal, I think. And then if you are using TrackLib samples, we can kind of make that easier with your distribution on the revenue.
Okay, awesome. So I guess if I were to jump on an elevator with you and you had to sort of summarize what Soundrop does for musicians, what's your 30-second elevator speech?
Oh, the same one as CD Baby, because fundamentally it's the same. It's, if you're an independent musician or a band or whatever, you upload your music to our service. We put it on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all those places. We deal with all those guys. We collect the money that is generated by people streaming and downloading your music, funnel it back to you through one single account. And then we take care of all that stuff. So, if I'm at a family reunion and my elderly aunt is like, what does your company do? That's basically what I say. Oh, we, all those things where you can stream music nowadays, we put bands' music on those and deal with all the accounting for them. It's really simplified. And then if people are like, oh, you mean like CD Baby or DistroKid? What's the difference between yours? Then I can go into, oh, well, ours is like a slightly different model. It's for cover song musicians. We have integrated licensing and payout splits and stuff like that.
Awesome. So you do have some overlapping tools with CD Baby. I know that the single sign-on that I had with show.co, for example, as soon as I clicked on show.co from within your dashboard, it signed me right in, just like from CD Baby. And they have a lot of cool marketing tools. Is there any discussion about sort of more overlapping tools or maybe closer integration with CD Baby in the future? Or is the focus on continuing to differentiate the two services and pricing models and feel?
Continue to differentiate, because different types of musicians just need different things. And, you get a system as technically complex as like a digital distribution, upload artist tool system. And, trying to be all things to all people actually ends up creating a lot of gaps. So we're really fortunate that we kind of have these two different systems that are really pointed in two different directions in terms of like which artist communities they're tailored for. So
okay.
Who knows what happens in the long-term future, but right now the system that we have is really working well. I mean, we get all the benefits of scale from having access to the same pool of resources. But we get the competitive advantage of being able to tailor, tweak things for individual audiences.
That's terrific. Yep. Little more personalized service at the taqueria stand.
Yeah. Well, but also CD Baby has like, publishing administration for songwriters and content ID for artists, whose music's getting like re-uploaded and shared on YouTube. So yeah, see, but the show.co thing, that's another one of our sister companies. That's why we're both integrated with it.
Yep. And they offer some really cool, unlock, share your email address and you unlock a download. And let's see, what else does show.co offer? Because they normally charge for that. But I guess if you're either a CD Baby or a Soundrop artist, you get access to those tools for free, correct?
Yep, that is correct. And you can actually use show.co. Through show.co, there's a feature called Ad Builder, I believe, is what they call it. And it allows you to actually, for I think as little as like $30 or $20 or $50 or something like that, 50 or less or something is like the minimum. And you can buy like targeted ad space on like Spotify, where it like plays a little bit of your song and it's like a little audio ad. And they're building a lot of new stuff with show.co right now. And I think if there were those kind of services or features that we that were ours, or anything that is going to be really valuable for any type of musician, there's no reason for us to not both CD Baby and Soundrop do it. But then there's some stuff where it's like, oh yeah, CD Baby's not going to mess around with that, but Soundrop has to do it, or vice versa.
Okay. That makes sense. Kind of a Venn diagram of companies. You guys have a little bit of overlap, but you're trying to keep the branding and the marketing separate. So
yeah, you keep the branding and the marketing separate, just because if CD Baby started talking about like video game covers, 95% of CD Baby's like artists and audience would be like, what? But you do that with Soundrop and people are like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if we start talking about publishing administration and, claiming your composition and registering it at Soundrop, people are going to be like, what? Why? I don't need that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I did want to ask you, just sort of on a personal note before we wrap up. I was looking at your LinkedIn and you've got a part-time job too, which kind of caught my attention. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
The preschool?
The preschool. You, as if you're not busy enough, you also run a preschool.
I do, with my wife. And that's actually, it's her passion, is early childhood education. So her and her sister run they're the teachers. They're the ones that really run the place. What I do is the bookkeeping and the billing and the money and the like, oh, this thing's got to happen, that thing's got to happen, got to pay the taxes, got to just keep the kind of ships running on time. And that's just like, it's like a side gig for me, but it's my wife's full-time job, but I'm the owner of the school. Like we own the place. So,
got it. So
it is kind of funny because it doesn't really fit in. Except, I put it on my LinkedIn. It's like, hey, I know how to run a small business, and it's not just like, oh, if it's music industry, I'm good, but it's like, I can do other stuff, and having that, like sorry, it's freaking dogs. Basically the chief executive, of that company.
Do you get to interact with any of the preschoolers, or is it all paperwork and books?
Mostly paperwork and books. And back in the day, I used to do it a lot more. When my job was like packing CDs at CD Baby. A lot of times I was like, go hang out at the preschool, go play with the kids. These days, especially, and then stuff all went crazy with COVID, but
yeah.
And now there's like a lot less kind of open visiting and hanging out than there used to be.
Sure.
But yeah, I love kids. I love little kids. So it's, it was a natural thing for me to want to participate in, if not my personal original passion. But I like doing things in the world that make people's lives better. And much like when you take care of somebody's music, they're like, oh, so thankful, because like they have a relationship with that music that's like way, way, way deeper than just kind of like a transactional thing. And the same thing is obviously true with people's children. When you feel like your kid is safe at your preschool, like what a wonderful thing to be able to provide for somebody, is just take that one worry off. They're not worried about their kids during the day. Who's watching their kids, It's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So musicians can focus on making music, and they know that you've got their back with distributing their especially their covers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're trustworthy. Not only are we part of CD Baby, and we've been doing this for decades, but we are now here for you specifically. And I like to think that the way that we run our business like shows that in every moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, especially with a wife and kids and side business and running a company. I mean, I don't know how you fit this in, but I really do appreciate your time tonight.
No problem. I mean, I used to be the brand manager, so anything that's kind of like brand ambassador stuff is interesting and fun for me. So I'm happy to do it. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you again, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks, man. You too, Brian.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode. I've been running this podcast now for 77 consecutive weeks, and I love it. Thank you so much to each and every listener out there. I was looking at my statistics, and I think it's so cool that I've got listeners all over the world, and a huge number of you from India. That is so awesome. I need to interview some Indian producers on here, so if you've got some in mind, hit me up at houseninjamusic@gmail.com or DM me on any social media platform at houseninjamusic. That said, I'm going to have to try an every other week format, meaning our next episode will be out Monday, June 5th. I'd prefer to keep this running every week, but as a producer, my core business is producing music, and because of some changes in my personal situation since moving the studio back to Atlanta, I'm finding I just don't have time to make music. Add to that the pandemic in the United States is finally getting under control. I really want to start performing again, and I just need more time, and the only way that I can find that is by scaling back the frequency of the podcast for now. It's a hard choice, but I think a lot of being a successful small business owner comes down to prioritizing your most precious resource, your time. So please stay with me. We'll be back in 2 weeks with some more amazing guests, tips, and tricks. And once again, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, this is the House Ninja reminding you to be somebody's hero today.